Hello, Tech Pros, episode 180.
If I keep telling myself to work without a net and be myself, I'm the most successful and I'm the least stressed. So just be yourself.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Paula Paul. Happy Friday, Paula.
Hey, happy Friday, Chad.
Are you ready for the weekend?
I am. I'm ready.
Awesome. I am too. I am ready for just a little bit of rest and relaxation. It's been a long, busy week. We've got school started up just recently, and it's been like nonstop here at the Bostic household and at the Hello Tech Pros podcast. So I am ready for just 1 or 2 days of just a little bit of downtime and can't wait to get to that Sunday where I can be unplugged.
I'm with you. Same thing here. Kids back to school, all sorts of events and, day work, day jobs, night jobs. So I'm with you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Paula Paul entered the workforce as a software engineer after an internship with IBM in the early 80s. Since then, she has shipped commercial software, evangelized .NET for Microsoft, and held executive positions in corporate IT. After flipping the table mid-career, she came back to technology through a passion for teaching people to code. Paula is currently an architect with the AmWINS Group, Inc., and enjoys the community as an ABI Syster, diversity speaker, and mentor. Paula, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I am a like-minded individual. I love the topic of people and diversity and teaching people code or technology or just getting either our youth, like my daughter, right? I'm teaching her a little bit about just logic and math and reasoning, and there's some awesome kind of tools on her iPad that we're going through and doing that. And then also just like there's some folks that I know in my personal life that are adults and are trying to figure out how to shift their careers, 40, 50 years old, and there's shakeup in the industries and they're losing their jobs or looking for other opportunities. And I think there's no better time in your life than right now to get into technology.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think it's wonderful, all of the online tools available that you can just kind of learn code and visually code. When I first started, it wasn't something that was relegated to the, kind of geeks or certain type of person. IBM would basically take anyone that showed an aptitude for logic. And actually, when I first started at IBM, my first manager, a full-time job manager, was a black gentleman, and he was the manager of the B team devs. I was junior, so I went to the B team, and then the A team manager was a woman. So I often have looked back over my career and kind of wondered, well, when did all that change? So I think it's starting to shift back around now that coding is really something that everybody should learn some basic elements of. It's something we all depend on. And I think, we're coming past that techno-adolescence of, people who code are only one flavor of person. So I'm very excited about where things are going.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that it's improving because I grew up in the Midwest, and there's a lot of people that look like me and sound like me and act like me, and that's awesome. I like me, and so I like them, but I like other people too. And just knowing that there is this divide in many cases in technologies. You go to technical conferences, and at least 20 years ago when I first got into technology, first got into software development, it was a dude fest, right? There's just not very many ladies around there. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess ladies don't want to be in tech. But no, they do in many cases. We're just not providing a great, I don't know. We're just not doing a good enough job.
It's a tough topic because on the other hand, when I do talk to my male colleagues, you don't want people to take the blame on themselves for something that I really think a lot of the media exposure in the late 80s and early 90s painted a picture for good media purposes. So again, for example, when I first went to IBM, we all wore, the guys wore ties, believe it or not. I wore a little suit and, pantyhose and heels. I've never worn pantyhose to code for, 20 years. But there was a different, it was, professional discipline. And I do think, and as a matter of fact, 1983 was when I took my full-time position at IBM. That was also the peak year for women gaining computer science degrees, and then it kind of plummeted from there, and now it's kind of bouncing back up. So I think it's not about whether women or black folks or anyone wants to code or likes to code. I think it's about the picture that's been painted about what programming is, and we're starting to paint different pictures of what programming is, and I'm really excited about that because my technology career has really served me really well, and I love it, and I love working with people who love technology. It's just we hit a bump there in the way that it was painted as a career.
Yeah, I love that, and I love what you're saying here is we're kind of using just a different landscape to paint with, right? We're making it look more like natural life, and instead of just like a monochrome kind of environment and a bland picture. Let's use all the diversity that we have in this world, and I think we'll get better code out of it. I think we'll get better business out of it, and we'll have a lot more fun doing it. So before the call, we were actually joking around because I had a big screw up, or a little screw up, on my input form to be a guest on the show, and there's supposed to be a comma delimited field where every day of the week, every topic of the week, there is motivation, comma productivity, comma so forth, and it results in a drop down. And I didn't know it, but I missed the comma in between technology and people. So when Paula signed up, I couldn't tell if she had signed up for a Thursday technology episode or a Friday people episode, because to me it just looks like technology people. And so I said, hey Paula, do you want to talk about technology or about people, because it says technology people? And you said, what did you say?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was an awesome little glitch, and I kind of figured out what happened there, and it is, I specifically picked that because I got a big kick out of it, because that is what I do in my, as you progress through your career and you gain more experience. We were talking earlier that you can only do so much as an individual, but if you want to deploy large and complex systems or help guide organizations through technology change, I always say the technology is the easy part, and you have to kind of guide people or work with and influence people in order to make progress. So I like to talk about technology people.
Perfect. Well, I absolutely agree. But for me, that was a tough lesson, not to just learn in my head, but to actually implement in my heart and get it out there, because there's introverts, and then there's shy people, and then there's people with social anxiety. And so that was me. I was very, very anxious as a young adult, as a middle-aged adult, really, is just getting out there and meeting people and having discussions like this with random people, strangers, or people that I worked with, but I wasn't really, really close. Like I didn't have years of experience hanging out, and we weren't in the trenches together. Just, people in the conference room, or people down the hall, or people from another department. And so it was always like this very, like this pain in my stomach every time that someone asked me a question, every time a project manager that was new to the company said, hey Chad, what's the status on XYZ? I just would freeze up. I would get this pit in my throat, and a pit in my stomach, and the scratch in my throat, and I just had no idea where it was coming from and how to articulate myself. And I really did myself a disservice. I did the companies that I work for a disservice by trying to avoid those conversations and avoid building relationships with people. And, I still worked on my code. I still worked on my technical things. And I think I did a pretty good job there. But I know now, right, that it would have been so much better if I had figured out how to get over those fears, get over that social anxiety, and work on developing these relationships, and understand that we all need people in our lives to make these big things of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And my goodness, hats off to you. I often feel some of that, but certainly not to the level that you've described of I'm a natural introvert. I love coding. The compiler is logical and it doesn't make irrational statements to me. So a lot of, even like in my current work, you go into an organization and I kind of like to see, well, where are these people coming from? Are they a corporate IT shop that's been doing nothing but Microsoft Stack for the last 13 years? Well, it's, if you go in there and say, I'm some big architect and we shall start using, Angular 2 or React or something that's completely outside of their perspective, you're going to not meet with success, or you're going to meet with a lot of opposition. And it is a really interesting challenge to work with technology people, and you have to understand where they're coming from. And I think it helps now. I certainly, 15 years ago couldn't have even thought this way because I was in it. And having gone through multiple waves of technology now, it's given me a perspective. But wow, it's taken a long time for me to get to this as well and understand not just that the people are the interesting and complex part, but like how to work around that and how to lead people without beating them over the head, which never works.
Absolutely. And another episode, right, is Leadership Wednesday, which is for that exact reason, right? You don't have to be a manager to be a great leader. You have to learn how to inspire and entice people and influence people in order to kind of follow the direction in which you want to go, or you want them to go, which is difficult. It's really, really difficult. I know there's a lot of listeners out there, because I've gotten the feedback. Chad, sometimes you go into too much detail on the software development. Let's get some more infrastructure folks in here. So sign up. Come sign up on the forum. Go to hellotechpros.com/guest, sign up, be a guest, and we'll talk about infrastructure stuff. But Paula here is a developer, and so she knows my pain and she knows my thrills. And so I'm going to geek out, and I don't care if you don't like it. So I'm going to geek out for a minute, because I've always loved the debugger in IDEs. You know why? Because you can step through it. You can ask somebody, okay, what's wrong? There's a problem, or there's not a problem. You think there might be a problem, or you think there might not be a problem. Let's prove it. And we can step through the code one line at a time and inspect every single little bit. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. But the process allows you to see exactly what's going on and allows you to get to the root core issue of what's happening, which is amazing. But that doesn't, to my knowledge, that doesn't exist with people and relationships and communication. I can't put a break point in this conversation and say, all right, hang on, let me step into Paula's brain, and she's telling me one thing, and I'm observing this, but I think there's something else deeper in hidden messages and meanings that's going on here. Let me try to step through her codes in her brain one at a time and see if I can really figure out what's going on. I don't know that tool exists yet.
I wish. And even, that's a really great point about debuggers, because it also ties to personality types. There are people who will, it's like, I need to use a strongly typed language. Microsoft's contribution of TypeScript being the best thing that ever happened to JavaScript, which I actually give Microsoft a lot of credit for TypeScript. But if you are in the old-fashioned Myers-Briggs approach to people, if you're a sensing person and you need that level of detail, and you are I need to step through this code line by line to debug it, I would say that's a Myers-Briggs sensing type. And there are some developers who are intuitives. My husband is a little of both, because you can present him with a problem and he'll say, oh, I bet it's in this area, without going to the debugger. So I think too, like, even people who code have different styles. And what I run into a lot in corporate IT is there's folks at the top do tend to be more authoritative at times, and they'll want to say everybody must do it the same way. And I think that's where some of these processes break down in technology, because the intuitive folks do have something to bring. So forcing intuitive folks to work in a sensing sort of approach might limit some of their natural intuitive skills. And then vice versa, if you take sensing folks and you say, oh, we're just going to throw you into loosely, weakly typed JavaScript and good luck with that, and here's the, inspector, they'll just go nuts. So I think it's funny to look at what you're trying to do and then the people you have to work with and what their styles are and how to get the best out of them, which is not a typical tech shop.
Absolutely. And we're talking about influencing and motivation and trying to get people to follow these rules, right? Whether we're in a command and control environment and we say, thou shall do this, XYZ, or whether we're trying to bring out the best of people. I have seen so many times, both from myself, I hate to admit, but from myself and from other peers and people that I've worked with, especially the super, super smart technical people, is this pervasive, passive resistance, right? Where if they don't believe you or they don't buy into the thing that you're saying, like, hey, we must switch over to Angular 2. They're like, no, Angular 2 is strong. I'm not doing that. It doesn't matter how much you threaten them. It doesn't matter how much you implore them. It doesn't matter how much you say, we have to do this or else. If they don't want to do it, they're just not going to do it. Have you seen that?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Well, I also joke because, you work with people and I think a lot of times people are just afraid of change, or, this is the change this week and you're going to come back to me next week and it'll be something else. And you get that fatigue. But I also have a saying that I joke with them about that, he or she who writes the code wins, because if you get something to work and something goes into production, that's a major achievement these days. And business value from that thing is not necessarily because it's Angular 1 or Angular 2 or TypeScript, where you get those unhidden or those hidden costs are, okay, it's in production now and the business is getting value from this, but if we double our volume, is it going to break? And if we need to add a new feature, is that now painful? So I think it is hard to translate those things, and developers might get very quick at producing value in the frameworks that they're using, and you might not see those hidden costs for like 5-10 years sometimes. So it's a balance. It's hard you can't just tell somebody, hey, do it this way. You have to reason with people, especially technical people, because they tend to be very logic oriented.
Yeah, and they tend to do a lot of research, and they tend to do a lot of trial and error and just experimentation, right? And they tend to have, in many cases, a lot of personal experience and time invested into proving some things work and some things don't work. And fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, when you do something 3 times and it doesn't work, or you do something else 3 times and it works every single time, we get this like repeatability pattern in our head and say, okay, it's always going to be this case. And you just kind of stick with what you know and you stick with what works. And sometimes that's a great thing, and sometimes that's terrible because, the environment has moved on, right? The community has moved on. The ecosystem that we live in is different now, and we need to readjust our thinking.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned infrastructure, because all of your code-oriented friends are now infrastructure people. For example, we're deploying our first services to Microsoft Azure, and you could go Heroku or Azure or AWS. So we're predominantly a Microsoft shop and have ties for Azure. And it is these days. Infrastructure is code. You script it. You can manifest it through logic and code or PowerShell or what have you. So I always I've started saying now that like code is code, infrastructure is code, and actually data is code. And those skills that you know as a developer are now something you can apply to managing infrastructure. That's a huge shift for a traditional like a corporate IT infrastructure shop, and it's there's always been a classic mistrust between the IT infrastructure side and the application side. In fact, in a lot of shops, they'll have different directors for infrastructure and applications. And it's this is going to be a really cool and interesting shift, I think, that I'm very excited about where things go with the cloud-based deployments and so forth.
Yeah, the DevOps world, right, where we're kind of blending, and there's not this big division, this big wall in between the two departments anymore. In many cases, it's so much blended, it's gray area. But I feel very strongly in agreement with what you said about it's a great thing for the dev teams, for the developers, right? Because now we can do so much more. We can automate so much more. We can have repeatable processes that don't break down because we forget to check off a bullet point on our list or whatever. But how do you think it affects, since we're talking about people here on People Friday, how does it affect the people that are in the infrastructure careers where they don't want to be developers, they don't want to code, they don't want to learn PowerShell, they don't want to learn Go, they don't want to learn these kind of infrastructure-y programming languages, they just want to manage the infrastructure?
I think that's a valid career path, and then it is just like anything else. You have to say, well, what companies really provide that career path. And I also, as you coach people in their careers, you say, okay, the needs of the individual and the needs of the employer are two different sets of needs. And for an awful long time, they can run in parallel and coincide. And then at a certain point, the corporation might say, we are spending a lot of money and using a lot of operational time changing out the SAN every 5 years. Mm-hmm. Can we move more things to services? If you are in that kind of a company, you have to say, okay, so what areas of this company really depend on my skill set and where I want my career to go? So maybe it's network operations, because when you do have these cloud-based goals or services, the network is everything. And how do you make sure that the right MPLS is there and redundant networking? So I think that you'll always have very highly skilled network people involved, whether you just have on-premise infrastructure or hybrid, or you have cloud and on-prem. If you are the type of person who really just likes the hardware and being able to walk over and touch the servers and the racks, I mean, to me, that's looking at careers in the Google data centers or Microsoft Azure data centers. Because, I mean, for me, if I like that sort of thing, that would be like a candy store. It's nice. It's more hardware than I've ever seen before. I used to, in my first job way back at IBM, the developers were on the third floor, and we had to walk downstairs to the raised floor to pick up our printouts. So, awesome. There was the separation of the data center from the developers, and even in corporate environments, if you've still got a server closet, depending on where your offices are located, that might be really expensive real estate to be putting a server closet in. So I just think you got to look at things from a long term and take your career where you want it to go, not necessarily where your company wants it to go. And you might have to make some long-term plans to get there.
Yeah, I love that. And to me, that goes... it speaks to adaptability, right? As professionals, we all need to be adaptable. We need to, if the economy, if the ecosystem, if the infrastructure is changing and I want to keep the same career path that I'm on, then that means that I may have to look for an opportunity outside of this company, or I may have to look for an opportunity outside of this industry, right? If I'm in fintech or if I'm in biotech or whatever, I may need to switch to something more like energy or more like government or something like that, right? Yeah. But no matter what, it's still up to me. Like, as a professional, my career is in my hands. And if I sit there and play the victim card, like, dude, that's gonna end up bad for everybody
over time. Yeah. Or even if you're in the infrastructure world, you could start looking at companies like Rackspace that go into companies that have on-prem infrastructure, and they try to, manage it for them. So that would be a total infrastructure job. It's just you're managing somebody else's. So I mean, there's a lot of career opportunities for people who think of themselves as an infrastructure-oriented person. It's just you can't force the company that you're at to go in the same direction that you want your career to go. You have to kind of figure that out.
Awesome. So, Paula, speaking of change and changing yourself and changing your mind and changing your direction, in just a moment, I want to ask you about how we can change not really our personalities, but our behaviors in the office, our behaviors when we're working with people in technology. For instance, right, you are an introvert, but in certain situations, you have to be very extroverted. Like you have to speak your mind and you have to win friends and influence people and so forth. So in just a moment, I want to ask you about how we as introverts or we as certain personality types in business can shift our behaviors while we're dealing with other people at work. But first, let's take a quick break and thank our sponsors. Chad Bostic here, and I've got a very special announcement concerning next week. Next week is going to kick off my very first Signature Series week. That is one full week dedicated to a single course, a single topic, and that topic next week is career development, specifically my Career Hyperdrive course, how to get unstuck in your career and launch your career back into hyperspace. Now, we're going to have 7 full days of content. And what you're going to get out of it is motivation that you need to overcome your biggest career obstacles, productivity tips to help you crush it at work without killing your personal life, leadership training that will build your respect and influence across the organization without needing to move into the management tracks, a technology mastery blueprint that's going to guide you through the process of selecting the right technology for the right problem every time, social engineering hacks to break into the elite inner circles and get a seat at the adult table, entrepreneurship tactics that will raise your value and salary within your organization and increase your reputation and negotiation power to the marketplace, and the peace of mind to unplug from the job without anxiety or guilt. Now, if this sounds good to you, you do not want to miss any of the episodes next week. And you're going to want to sign up for the course, the online course, because you're going to get access to all of the takeaways and all of the homework sessions. There will be homework. You have to do the homework in order to get unstuck. You can't succeed just by listening. So go to hellotechpros.com/career to sign up for the free course and get access to all the content. Again, that's hellotechpros.com/career. Okay, we're back with Paula Paul. We've been talking to Paula about just the technology people, as we joked about at the beginning of the episode, because of the glitch in Chad's software to sign up for being a guest on the podcast. Instead of technology, people, it's technology people, and that is exactly the topic that we're talking about today. And all the little nuances, right? We're all individual snowflakes and we're all beautiful people and it's wonderful, but we're not a compiler that just makes sense and does the exact same thing every time with the same set of data, right? We have emotions and we have personality types and we have like ingrained behaviors in us that makes us act really quirky and weird and strange and different in lots of different circumstances. So, Paula, how can we leverage this diversity, not just diversity in the marketplace, diversity at work, but diversity in our own brains, right? Diversity in our thought process, and figure out how the best way that we can connect to other people at work by maybe in certain circumstances, changing our natural behaviors. And like if you're an introvert, sometimes you got to be a little bit extroverted and speak up. Or if you're an extrovert, sometimes you need to maybe shut your trap and do a little bit more listening, right? What do you think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've thought about, things that have evolved through my own career, because I am a natural introvert. And in my first days at IBM, it was, very hard to just not keep my head down on the keyboard. And then you get thrown into a team project and some of your natural characteristics start to come out. And in later years, there's even been tricks, because, I did work in an infrastructure area and managed some large infrastructure-oriented projects over the years. So sometimes just about the kind of person you are makes it challenging for people to interact with you. So I've done things like, put M&Ms near the door in my office, open container, and it's like you kind of lure people in.
Yep. Tech bait.
So tech bait. And then for me too, it's helped more recently to try to try, it's hard to look at what that other person might be going through. And an example there is we, stood up a wiki at work to start capturing ideas, and people are reluctant to share their ideas sometimes because they're afraid they'll get shot down. Mm-hmm. And I openly tell people that the wiki is my place to be wrong, and everybody needs a place that they can be wrong so you can talk about it. And I've thanked people for disagreeing with me, sometimes, because that's how your ideas get better. And being wrong is actually like you can't lose. If you're wrong, you learn something. If you're not wrong, well, that's cool. You succeeded in something. So, I mean, I know this imposter syndrome thing is a relatively new concept in terms of my career lifespan. When I first went to IBM, I was a math major and I took programming courses. I just knew some things about engineering, which got me into the area I worked at IBM. But I never felt like I wasn't a programmer. It's like IBM hired me to do something and I was going to do it. So I kind of look back over the span of time, and I kind of see people are afraid. So maybe one thing, if I could just give anybody advice on this, is that, well, your fears in many cases are the same fears that everybody else that you're working with has. Am I going to be able to learn this? What about my existing code? When will I have time? So I just think that if you can look at it from the other person's eyes, sometimes it helps you reduce your own fear because you're all in it together.
Man, that's so true and so powerful. I mean, speaking on behalf of the fearful, right? Speaking on behalf of the anxious, it's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum where it's like a floating point, right? It's not a 1 or a 0, right? There's a lot of values in between. And some circumstances, some people are going to react very strongly and be very afraid of this change or very afraid of this situation or whatever, and other people are going to be like, no big deal, right? Let's move on, let's keep going, no problem. And there's going to be conflict in certain circumstances, right? Because of those differences between the two groups of people. If one group of people is saying, yep, we got it, let's go on, we bought in, let's move, let's go faster, let's just implement it and get done and move on. And the other people are like, whoa, hold on to the reins there, Skippy. Like, I don't... Obviously, you guys haven't thought about how this is going to impact us. And by impact us, I mean impact me. Like, this is going to change my job, or it's going to change my how it affects my personal relationships outside of work, or my schedule, or my career, or I'm really happy doing what I'm doing right now, or I'm just figuring out what I'm doing right now. And you're like moving my cheese around, dude. Can you just calm down a little bit?
We definitely are dealing with that in many aspects by adopting something like Azure and moving into more recent versions of our technology stack. And some of it is fear, some of it is, oh my God, how am I going to learn this, and can I learn this, and I really enjoy what I'm doing now, why do I need to do something different? And some of it sometimes is about I think control. If somebody else can go off and do this and push services out to a cloud service, I don't have any control over that anymore. And how do I fit in? How am I relevant? And those are all very valid and important questions. It is a challenge. For me, it is a challenge to know when to push part of the organization in a direction to explore what we might be able to do, and also to balance the needs of the rest of the organization that they want to know, hey, what's up, and how is this going to impact me? That's where the people is the tough part, and the technology is the easy part.
Absolutely. Yeah, the people is the tough part. And as an entrepreneur recently, with just in the last 6 months, a little bit in the last year, I've been doing a lot of research on marketing, right? So if I'm starting a business, how do I market my message? How do I sell myself or sell my products or my services, right? How do I pitch my podcast to potential guests or to potential sponsors and so forth? And this is all so new to me. It's so outside the realm of logic. It's outside the realm of what makes sense to a computer or what makes sense to like a network. And it's really tapping into those emotions, the emotions of the people, and having that deep empathy and understanding what's going on in their head, right? Yeah. So when I reach out to guests, there's a lot of guests in the early days, in the initial days, that I thought I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of fear and worry that they were going to reject me because they thought I was stupid, because they thought this idea was nuts, because they didn't understand it or whatever. It was just a waste of their time. But really, when I engaged in dialogue with them and started having conversations about, okay, why are you hesitating here? What is it about it that you don't like? And they're like, well, I like it, but Chad, I don't like my voice. Like every time I hear myself on a voicemail, I sound just ridiculous, and I don't want to hear myself on the tape. I'm like, okay, well, that has nothing to do with me, right? That has nothing to do with the podcast. That has nothing to do with me. That has nothing to do with this situation. It's, you don't like your own voice? Your voice is lovely. Your voice is beautiful. You're awesome. Or, I don't think I'm smart. I don't have anything to add. Nobody cares about it. My title is not important enough. I'm not a CEO or CIO or CTO, right? I'm not a director. I'm just an infrastructure person, or I'm just a developer. I recently got laid off and I'm in the middle of looking for something else. And so all of these fears and anxieties, I started hearing back from other people, and it made me really think through a lot of different conversations that I've had in the past about why people are pushing back on certain situations or holding back in certain situations. And I'm thinking, you know what? I think there's a lot more like introspection and just a little bit of fear and caution than I've ever really given credit for everybody else, because I was so internally focused, right? I was so focused on my own problems and my own worries and my own fears and concerns that I didn't take time to appreciate that, you know what, Paula's probably got them too.
Yeah. Oh, everybody. And it is, for me, and I haven't always been like this. It's, my own personal evolution, but I also tell people that I enjoy working without a net, and I will, I say, if you ask me for my opinion, I will give it to you, and I'll be honest, because I'm really an awful liar, but I also don't always have a good defense for, what happens if I tell you something that you don't want to hear. And it's all just my opinion, but in these larger executive discussions, sometimes the higher level folks are used to being told what they want to hear. So I found it much harder to work with in that kind of environment where I'm always trying to second guess and tell the executives what they want to hear. And I have decided for myself that I work without a net, always trying to provide rational information and the backing for what my opinions are, but I can't try to twist that to be what someone wants to hear. It just doesn't come out right, and it feels very inauthentic, and my life is so much less stressful. So I'm just, I have some perspective, one way of looking at things. I have my own opinions, and I'll back them up, and I'm trying to work with people. I don't force anything on anyone. A joke that an architect has no control over budgets, timelines, or resources. We just have opinions and demonstrations of technology. So I find that a very freeing thing, is to try and let go of my own fears of what if somebody disagrees with me, or it's like, well, that is good. It's healthy for people to be able to disagree with you.
I love it. Yeah, I love the fact. I love two things. I love the fact that we're talking about. I don't know. I just love this whole thing. I just love it. So I'm going to stop here because I'm butchering what you just said. So I'm going to leave it at face value, and just yes, I absolutely. Perfectly, completely agree with this. Paula, before we leave this episode, before we leave this conversation, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience? And then feel free to share the best way that we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Oh, sure. Well, connecting with me, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, Paula Paul tweets. So I'm connected socially. LinkedIn and Twitter, best way to get at me. And I think there is an About Me site that is about.me whack Paula Paul that also has ways to contact me. So feel free if you have any questions, or I'm happy to connect with people in the community. Words of wisdom it's hard. I know for me, I still get those moments of fear of, well, what if somebody disagrees and basically gets very angry about something that I say or an opinion I express. But I find if I keep telling myself to work without a net and be myself, I'm the most successful and I'm the least stressed. So just be yourself.
Paula, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value the fact that we can have a conversation about technology people without a comma in between, because for me, that's a huge passion of mine. And really, that's why I started this podcast, and that's why I called it Hello Tech Pros, because I wanted to have conversations with technology people. And honestly, I had no idea how to brand things and what to call it. And I was like, what am I going to call this podcast? I don't know how to name it. So what am I going to say to people? I'm going to say, I don't know. I'm just going to say, there's going to be people. They're going to be working with technology. I'm just going to be like, hello, tech pros. And there you go. That's why we're here.
You should trademark technology people with no space and no comma.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to have to get me an IP lawyer on the phone and lock it up. We'll work on that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Chad.
You bet. Tech Pros, if you are a technology people, trademark 2016, hellotechpros.com, LLC. If you are a technology people with no space in the middle, if you are a person who works with technology, if you resonate with any of this message that we have been talking about, dude, lady, whoever you are, I feel you, man. We all get to these periods where we want to do the right thing, and sometimes we're conflicted with what the right thing is, right? There's what the right thing is for what I know and my experience and what I'm passionate about, and then there's what's the right thing for the overall organization. And I would like for those to be 100% in alignment all the time, but sometimes there's not. And so many times that we just need to take a look at ourselves and just do a little bit of reflection upon ourselves and say, you know what, in this situation where people are not listening to me, I don't feel valued, I don't feel listened to, I don't feel like people are following my influence and my recommendations. What's going on? Is it them? Are they just being difficult to work with? Or is it me? Is there something about me that's not coming across the way that I intend? Am I not being genuine? Or am I not being empathetic to their needs and their fears as well? And if you want to make a really big change in the world, the first thing that you have to do is look at changing yourself. You've been listening to Paula Paul, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/180. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been People Friday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I discuss entrepreneurship. On Sunday, being unplugged. Monday, motivation. Tuesday, productivity. Wednesday, leadership. Thursday, technology. And then back again on Friday to talk people and communication. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.